David Barsamian. Let's talk about Iran in particular in post-1945 U.S. foreign policy. Washington laid out its grand area strategy, and Iran takes on enormous significance because of its oil wealth. Noam Chomsky. Oil wealth and strategic position. It was taken for granted in the grand area strategy planning that the United States would dominate the Middle East, what Eisenhower called the strategically most important part of the world, a material prize without any analog. The basic idea of the early stage of the grand strategy and the early stages of the war was that the United States would take over what they called the grand area. Of course, the Western Hemisphere, also the former British Empire, and the Far East. They assumed at that time that Germany would probably win the war, so there would be two major powers. One German-based, with a lot of Eurasia, and the United States, with this grand area. By the time it was clear that the Russians would defeat Germany, after Stalingrad and then the great tank battle in Kursk, the planning was modified, and the idea became that the grand area would include as much of Eurasia as possible, of course maintaining control of Middle East oil resources. There was a conflict over Iran right at the end of the Second World War. The Russians supported a separatist movement in the north. The British wanted to maintain control. The Russians were essentially expelled. Iran was a client state under British control. There was, however, a nationalist movement, and the Iranian leader, Mohammad Mossadegh, led a movement to try to nationalize Iranian oil. The British obviously didn't want that. They tried to stop this development, but they were in their post-war straits and were unable to do it. They called in the United States, which basically took the prime role in implementing a military coup that deposed the parliamentary regime and installed the Shah, who was a loyal client.